As a person living in Canberra for the more than the vast majority of my life, I'm a person who I have a sense of. I've always had a sense of a code of order. There's a code, um, and there's an interview in about 1972 with Bowie, David Bowie, talking at the BBC studios, and he's asked to disclose information concerning fan mail, and he's asked if he believes in God, and he talks about an energy form, but not being sure about, or wouldn't like him to put a name to it. Um, and I think that was tremendously wise and profound, as, especially for its time. I would almost be inclined to say it was because of Bowie that there's been this acceleration in the principles of art and art's significance. Um, and yet his humility, if you watch the black and white backstage footage of Ziggy Stardust tour, remarks and statements, you will hear him saying things like, "No artist has ever changed the world." And that in itself is a profound thing to say because it's led to consequential conversations about, well, why should we be trying to change the world? Where do you draw the lines between what the individual should be able to, um, you know, attain on their own terms, and how much when independent thinking, or even knowing how to go about teaching yourself on on topics like independent thought, or the difference between intellectual dishonesty and intellectual honesty. Sam Harris talks wisely about how the key concepts of uh, scientific methodology is not mathematical modeling; it's intellectual honesty, and that I'm prepared to call them now at this point of how much they've wanted to compound. It's like in Capital Chemist, when I worked for them, if they received a delivery of pharmaceutical drugs from API, Alpha Farm. API was Australian Pharmaceutical Industries. Alpha Farm were a generic brand, although they would be stocked through API unless bulk purchases were being funneled through the company's own warehouse or whatever. I don't give a fuck anymore. But the interesting thing, ironic thing, given what they've wanted to think and say, or say to me about me, or how they had judged me, surveillance. Like, if you put surveillance equipment in the hands of a religious believer who's a believer in a secret church group, can you stop and imagine that for a sec? It's like, oh, how do we learn about your religion? Which is probably going to be a piece of shit as soon as we can hear you say what you stand for. Oh, you have to prove that prior to entry that you're committed from the heart, and even after that, it's a tower of secrecy, secrecy this, secrecy that, discretion that. Can you imagine then putting surveillance equipment in the hands of those people? And just because, see, I know Gary Kanzer and Roger Toll as pharmacists. I know them as employers. I know them even as sex offenders, at least Roger. But I did not want to know of them in particular after telling them specifically that I do not. Um I wanted to work in a scientifically, well, a division of science, applied sciences, as part of getting away from religion, and that was very important to me. And he did. There was even some indication that they had respected that decision on my, well, that they would respect that of me. Instead, you've got these two men thinking that just because they've pumped out 40 pharmacies that they have better psychiatric and psychological knowledge than all modern psychiatrists or psychologists. They are cowards because of what they've done and because of what they've done to me. And once, I mean, I could have given a tearjerker speech in 20. Geez. I could have given a tearjerker speech in 2007 that would have had all of you people who have been superficially, it's people who believe in the power of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. You could have been separated from your own father, who you may have happened to have known certain things like Christianity didn't exactly save him from anxiety, and you might know things like that. But you'll have these dickheads believing in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all one thing. It's like, can you just come and admit it? You're trying to tell us you're inbred from a garden, but your first point to a crime scene is a woman eating an apple. And she was made from Adam's rib, the most she could do since they're married under holy matrimony and the politics of due process of wedlock is suck his cock every second that he wishes it, because you do unto others as you would have them wish them to do unto you. So, if I want you to suck my dick, then there are certain things I will do unto you. It's why I'm more in favor of Rabbi Hillel's original utterance of what is now called the Golden Rule. But essentially, I'm able to explain, and have been pretty much since the start of this decade, to magistrates' court, to police, to lawyers, and to everyone, how and why these two men. Now, I truly hope that the people who, particularly after they're dead, though I would like them in prison before they're dead, so I can see some justice from a distant standpoint. I wish the best for capital chemists, but really, if they knew the story of Gary Cancer, Roger Toll, and the integrity of their character, you're an anomaly to them if you're an unbeliever. What they're doing now, like Gary Cancer's scratched his head, the shape. Let's make a profile of nutters that boils down to photoelectric transferences, and he scratched his head thinking about it, and without thinking about it, because he was thinking about the money. He's done a John Howard flood of Asians into this country. Yeah, it probably would help if we had more Asian pharmacists in the franchise by about this point in time. They are cowards. Even in this state of physically disabling pain, I am prepared to debate these cowards. I am prepared to be at court talking to a judge or a panel of judges. I'm not afraid. I'm just, and in an ideal world, I wouldn't be. I always feel better when I don't get my scripts dispensed at a capital chemist store. But the way things have gone, I don't like to be reminded of pharmaceuticals in general. It's one reason a nerve pain capsule that is taken orally, it's not even particularly of benefit, hardly noticeable. But if I crack the capsules open and snort all of the content, like I was enjoying a weekend away from a break from them, stunning to watch that effect on myself, and so I've posted about it. But Roger Toll and Gary Cairns, I can't believe that they would act like that woman who drowned her kids in the bathtub this fucking far. Like, I cannot believe that. Do they want to root her? Do they want to root her in a courtroom going, I heard God say drown him in the bathtub? They are the most disgusting. So yeah, here's another thing. Put surveillance tech equipment. This is one element of the religious, I think, is religious psychopathology, is that they go, well, I've achieved this much, so now how much more, and how much more power. I think elements of it were definitely prominent in Hitler's mistreatment of the Jews, even his Reichstag maneuver where he burnt some of his own property down to represent and inspire an attitude of, oh shit, the Reichstag's being burnt down. Who did this? Let's defend our country, defend the homeland. And Hitler had, had organized that himself. What I love the Latin expression of audioderum partem. It can mean listen to both sides. I also love the concept of the false dichotomy, which is being given a false sense of either or. It's like if you were driving and your driving instructor had taught you that that there are only two lights at the intersection, or that there was there are only two lights that had any meaning. The yellow light and the green light, or the yellow light and the red light. A false sense of either or. So you end up forming a lot of your judgments and proliferating views and opinions through, and this is a fascinating field of philosophy called epistemology, which is not a philosophy in itself. It talks about theories of knowledge. What knowledge is, how do we know? Like, what can I know is a question of metaphysics in a very, and then how can I know is about epistemology. And so people who have sworn oaths to theistic, like a piece of art I'm very defensive of because I love it so much is obviously Doppler's from Marilyn Manson. A lot of my close friends. What I would do, well, because that was the other thing. I didn't know who a lot of my close friends were. So I'd often enjoy well, if you want, I'd play it and I would watch, and see what anyone I would play it in front of had to say back afterwards, because the truth be told, there were some friendship groups that I bonded with in my after 19 and early 20s, whose friendships I will always cherish, and they know who they are. Yeah, well, they know who they are because it's the only time could have been bothered to go to nightclubs and dance. So they know who they are. But I wanted to see what difference it made if talk of my early childhood wasn't wasn't in circulation, and the answer to that is yeah, thicker thicker skin and arms getting more musculature, and it made a massive difference to me. What I would judge an insincere person. What I hate is this idea that, oh, this must have been a sensitive moment, so I won't discuss it with you, though it involved you. And then they talk about that, or whether, however speculative or formative they feel their judgments were, behind your back. And there are ways to flush such people out, but yeah, I mean, to be upfront with, as I have with people in direct face-to-face conversations, um, about facts, about philosophy, about art, and to see what it got. I want you to think about this seriously, for those of you who are informed as you might be about what you might call my case, get plural, because there are cases. Essentially, uh, I now know that so I was being judged as neither Roger Toll nor Gary Cairns have any qualifications in psychology or psychiatry. They will violate Australia's constitution in involving someone in a scientific medical experimentation and against consent. If you're a member of staff that the owner has been calling a poof, but you haven't punched his face in because you're on a duty shift, then he may use surveillance means to contact you and sexually solicit that you perform an act using his company surveillance means. These aren't people that I would want to know, and there are no gains for me in inventing these things. And there were these accounts. And so what I just hate is, if you want to be the Freemasons and be a secret church, be a secret church. Don't ever contact me, and I don't much care. Like what you would want to call the science. I love it when they go, oh, this person's model for fighting people was Mortal Kombat, but nothing in Christianity, Judaism, or Islam or Freemasonry could ever be called any sort of psychological modeling at all. It's actually worse. Like fiction is a word that kids learn means something that has nothing to do with the real world or real life, and they learn that very young. Now, the Garden of Incest Eden, on the other hand, and the Eden Monero Cancer Support Group facade of Gary and Roger, tins on the occasional pharmacy counter. They're the worst two Australian organisms I've encountered. I felt bad when a paramecium died during a biology class experiment. I will not feel bad when Gary Cairns and Roger are dead. I hope that Freemasonry excites their children and offspring so much that they practice inbreeding just to find out what the most amazing Grand Poobah secret of the Freemason temple ever was. In Roger Toll's case, I just hope that... See, I mean, what I know about him, I would be happy to submit with my name on the documentation and make it a matter of public record, because I do not want healthcare to be extorted as a front for mistreatment of people in the ways that I think young people for some time now have already been quite attuned to working out was most likely to be the result of, say, clergy in the Catholic Church. Most people that go into a healthcare facility, they are not their mind is so much on their ailment that, it's, I would argue it's in many ways worse, by modern standards of modern rights and modern rights progress. But I'm quite certain that if what I have to say and the facts that are known to me were to come out, then, and even to come out to managing level pharmacists within the Capital franchise, they would be well compelled to either look for a new employer or have the name of the company changed. Yeah, no, they did. There are no two more organisms on the face of probably the planet. I haven't traveled outside of Australia, so certainly within Australia. No, Gary Cairns and Roger Toll are atrocious. I find them more offensive and inconsiderate than anyone's I've ever crossed paths with. And now that would be... listening to both sides doesn't mean so that you can then join up with one or the other. That's another thing that a monist would or religionists would think was the necessary outcome of is, yeah, you can weigh up both sides before you make a judgment. You can weigh up two sides of a two-party dispute and side with neither and distance yourself from both. You can do a lot of things that simply do not occur in the minds of religious thinking people. Now, some disgusting, truly disgust. I don't understand. Like, the ethics of the Freemason Church must be fucking spastic. Like, even if you were to get capture someone and take them to an area so secret that the story won't get out. Imagining Roger and Gary rape a disabled or a person without limbs, gagged, all these sorts of concepts. I'm not referring to anything I've seen in art or concept songs of the lyrics of which I'm familiar with. I'm talking about them. I'm talking about their character. I'm talking about things they've said to me. It came to a conversation where I was accosted by Roger within the Hughes pharmacy. It was at a time when original Anthony Lamb pre-Capital Chemist purchase Hughes pharmacy labeling boxes were still being kept in the back room in the shop, and Roger had lured me out to sit down at the table for a talk on was I or was I not in favor of illicit or street drug use. After being told, yeah, well, I won't say who was after being told contrary by, but Roger's statements pertaining to that weren't that he was going to indict or fire you for it if you were to say that you were. My issue immediately was that there's so much that you can do, and in certain circumstances and at times, without beginning to work out that the way that he's able to get at his info is by putting a trace on this or that moment in time. So it's a bit like a morbid version of a tarot card reading that sort of worked, but you wind up learning what you didn't want to know about certain means to surveillance that these people have. Why it's a problem is, I understand, as I've said before, in principle, why a person would want to guard their company. What I'm trying to say is that if you're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I was taught of Roger playing a part with policing and getting people put into psych wards, I was taught about this to a certain extent. There's something called framing the issue, and if your epistemology, essentially your theory of getting at knowledge, is a metaphysic that people have disputed, falsified, and chucked around, like it's like your filter or your lens or what the court would call prejudice. Well, then, therefore, because you believe in this, and this, we would see that you are potentially guilty of prejudice towards this or that person because they don't stand for this. Poetry, even things as so much as poetry that's inspired by elements of naturalistic reprehension towards the ransom money put out for. So you got Christians talking about whatever they're about, and then and because you've been literalizing Johannine gospel text, you now are you've had you love the right wing media. That's obviously God telling you new truths, and you can't look forward to anywhere sooner than to your future profession working in some form of counseling or psychology. So pardon me. Yeah. So if you were opposed, if you were trying to say "fuck you" back to the Christians, why don't you hold that ransom money was put up for this person being napped and handed over, captured and handed over, and this crucifixion in contempt? Yet, and you're trying to use these texts to threaten implicitly everyone else to believe in accord with you or agreement with you, or else be tortured forever. And then you want to blame art for all these sorts of things, when really every single disclaimer you've ever put on any art, even everything you will see put on adult, like pornography, which I rarely watch pornography, but there was a certain porn star who I felt was heartwarming. Is heartwarming, yeah. But yeah, I'm not much into pornography. But in principle, it should be there for whoever wants it whenever they want it. But it's not something that they're saying like base a modest metaphysic around all of this and obey like uh, obey or be tortured forever. So where's the warning on the where's the disclaimers? Every single disclaimer you've probably ever seen on every act, every movie that's an admitted fiction. All those disclaimers should be on the Bible. This talk I'll just summarize and dedicate to the Christians who want to read the Bible and say that God's all really good and all good. And I'd ask you to look up Isaiah 45 verse 7. I think you'll find that it says, I cause evil and I create woe. I, the Lord, do all these things. And if you'd like to debate that with me, then sure, do it. I'm not running for candidacy against them, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's not even perceived as sarcastic by either of the two of them and the both of them together, because I know that they already do think of themselves to be superiorly minded than political candidates, because they're Freemasons. So point one I'd like to make is that I think there's no, if someone has a metaphysic in place to know how that they think they're right to check or correct you or to offer a caveat, why isn't it better just to sit down and have a conversation with a person? You already know they've violated your privacy. Well, then you could, in the end, I had to say to Roger, just stop doing that. You are truly like you're helping, you're making me almost inclined to believe in weird supernatural amorphous piles of idiocy. Like, there were things you were good at. Why not create a legacy? You have no children. There are people that like you. I'm not one of them. There are people that do like you. And you are certainly pandering to a demographic of people that think it's the beauty of when businesses want to give back to the community. But you belong to a religion that thinks of population culling, the weak will perish, that it presides over Christianity, that is not too keen on being prepared to bring its apologists out. You don't even actually, you haven't considered I think actually no, Roger. Yeah, he's not a stupid guy. You will think that I'm a liar or a delude if I say that he is stupid. Stupid. He's it'll end up being a moot point, and in the context of working for someone, religious discrimination. If you're being marshaled, guided, mentored, or trained in to what would amount to be tantamount to something equivocal to a Freemasonry religious conversion, which how they insist on being so secretive, and yet they wanted to convert me to their church. Why? Why? What if that? How about it would have worked better for me if they'd keep their secrecy, let me enjoy my privacy. We would not have reached this point. But they thought they had a whole bunch of other ideas in mind. I was apparently, let me think, from Doppelhurst alone, and that seems like that. Uh, I mean, these are artists whose whole careers are inspirational on a perennial level, and because this particular it really means that this particular clip pushed more buttons in their minds. Um, I haven't even heard. Not only have I not heard any of them talk about what their qualifications were for research and establishing conflicts, but you get my idea. If you don't have training and you do have a religion, and you think your religion is better than training, then you're just going to be pushing and concealing. It's what Murdoch says. Um, Bury your mistakes is essentially what Roger moves when there's after insisting that he makes no mistakes. Yeah, and he has said to me that he and Gary make no mistakes. But yeah, I'd realize this. You with that particular piece of art, to hear the voiceover solely in a morally, as if it's a context of morally prescriptive, like what you want or what you would base an ideology on. I've heard tons of, uh, uh, it bears out in their minds, and you realize that it was wise to step back and go, well, I don't care if the Christians are saying that Jesus Christ is the savior, and you're saying he was just a martyr. Uh, I couldn't give a fuck. You already know that I had the integrity to say to you first, I do not join this business or have any interest in religious bullshit. And Roger had said to me that he would not essentially involve himself in any of my business outside of and having left his from following the conclusion of a shift, his franchise. So there was beginning to be a sense of mutual respect there, because what it is about you not standing up for something like privacy invasion and getting feedback about it constantly is that unless you contest them, they think that there's really good reason for them to be constantly invading your privacy. Like you have to. It becomes stand up for your rights, or have issue after issue framed and framed and framed. That there's a whole mindset of them making cake gone on that you only really know of from what they have the guts to say to your face. Them going, hmm, you, uh, So yeah, I mean, I would defend any of the art that I'm into against, certainly easily against their religion, because as a framework for assessing conflicts. I mean, how in the first place does a person who knows that he's been asked to be excluded and has agreed not to contact me at what was my residence at the time, to then still do so, to abuse his surveillance, his company's surveillance means. Yeah, this is something. It's something that definitely can't go on in the mistreatment, you see, and they're very clever at word shuffling to the point that um, either drugs that they don't sell, that aren't taxed, or that they can't make a profit from, or that they can't make a profit from that they think is worthy of the effort of the time that they would spend involving themselves in consideration of you, uh, even if it's unwanted by you and that's been stated indisputably to them. Uh, then yeah, they do not get the message. And so there's no one thing to chalk that down to, really. It's not that because I was winning debates online against theistic Christians and they are theists, that they were then, although, if you ask them what do they think an atheist is, you might find they have a 16th century view of that. Uh, but yeah, I get it. I get his circular reasoning. Well, how do you think smart? Some things, points that you will find are interesting of the profiles they'll generate in print. I think I would say in principle. I mean, they don't like to confront. This is the thing. They'll try and make. You could call it. You could chalk this up to a number of causal influential factors. Areas of the system that could be improved. Um, the fact that the fewer rights you know to access, then the more can be competed against, so that you can be fooled. But yeah, so these attitudes, these formative views of men like Gary and Roger that survey you, and they can take something that's truly, truly, truly important to you on a personal level, and you wouldn't have been offended even because it's not like they make over time. It's not like they make it a secret that you know they've surveyed you at certain times. That's no secret. And if they were to try and state that it would be, then that would be their Freemasonry, higher ethics coming out that are secret. Ethicals is a term, I think, usage. Ethical ideas, ethical principles, ethical philosophies. Oh, no, a bag of ethicals dumped on the dispensary floor. It's the name for pharmaceutical purchase stock. But yeah, the thing about the Christians can have the beliefs like, oh, we could change the whole world. with our beliefs from the Bible. And you could have someone like, you actually have men like these two men doing more to affect people's lives in ways that aren't detectable in most respects immediately, or be chalked up in interferences in ways that you would chalk to coincidence, chalk up to causally to coincidence, making things seem or appear coincidental. Yeah, so the mood is really different. I mean, when you visit, patronize different franchises, the more respectful, the more ethical. I've noticed that it genuinely is one's. If there are similarities, the staff uniforms have been blue. In terms of the main color that the staff will wear is blue and similar to the color of a police officer's shirt. And they can be the ones who even their pharmacists will go, oh, you take this substance for pain. Don't you know that it used to be, or it's a derivative of a plant that the Chinese used to smoke in secured opium dens in the early 1900s?